to get the in-person BEP review committee meeting started promptly. I'm going to call on Nathan James now to call the roll to establish a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Michelle Simcox. Here. Representative Mark White, for designee. Paul Marsh for Mark White. David Connor. Here. Senator Gresham. Is Senator Gresham on the line with us?
Brad Davis.
We have Michael Marin for Dolores Gresham. Ben Torres. Here. Eddie Pruitt. Here. Chris Henson. Here. Sarah Morrison. Here. Karen Kane. Here. Commissioner Schwinn. Commissioner McWhorter. Cliff Lippard. Here. Larry Ridings. Here. Bob Eby. Here. Mickey Hall. Here. Justin Wilson.
Linda West.
Has Senator Gresham joined us on the line?
I have Brad Davis.
Just Brad Davis? Okay, not just, he's a great guy. Hunter Zanardi. Dale Lynch.
Here.
Mayor McDonald. Here. Peter Muller or Catherine Hare.
Here.
Bobby Cox. Here. Madam Chairman, you have nearly unanimous quorum.
This is going to take time passing this microphone back and forth. I am extremely delighted to see that we have a quorum and we're duly convened and such a great participation today. So thank you also very much for taking time to come here and be with us today. We do have a very full agenda, but I also want to state for the record that without objection, our previous meeting recording will serve as the minutes for this meeting without objection. Before we move into the presentations, I do ask that each of you please introduce yourself, and if you're representing someone, please state for the record who you are representing. Thank you very much. We'll start over here to the right of
Director. Ben Torres. Bob Eby, Vice Chair of the State Board of Education.
Sarah Morrison, Executive Director.
Lillian Hartford, Chairman of the State Board.
Nathan James, I'm Director of Legislative and External Affairs for the State Board.
I have Brad Davis and Senator Dolores Gresham on the computer.
Dale Lynch, Executive Director with TOSS.
Linda Wesson, Assistant Director, OREA in the Comptroller's Office, designated for.
Mickey Hall, Wilson County School. Research Analyst, South Central.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Let's move into the agenda. The first item, I'm going to ask Paul Marsh, who serves as one of two research analysts for the House Education Committee, along with Nathan James on our staff, to go over some legislative basics before we get into two pieces of legislation that you have before you. You have a summary and the fiscal note for each bill that will come after their presentation. We need to understand what authority, if any, we have as a committee to act on legislation referred to us by the House of the Legislature. Nathan and Paul, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members. The House of Representatives has taken an unusual step, and that is to refer two active pieces of legislation to a committee outside of the legislative branch. That practice is actually prohibited by the Senate rules, but it is not necessarily prohibited by the House rules. So the action that they've officially taken is to hold further consideration of two pieces of legislation, one by Representative Leatherwood, who's joined us in the back of the room, and the other by Representative Freeman, who tells us that he's almost here. Matter of fact, he's walking in the door right now. This is Representative Bob Freeman walking in the door. So the question always comes when one of the houses of the legislature refers a bill, or that is to say, asks for consideration from an entity outside of the legislative branch, exactly what the authority is. So after consulting with the parliamentarian of the House of Representatives, what we've come to is that it's appropriate to have a discussion of the merits and the any potential pitfalls of the bill, an open and free discussion. And then what we will do at the tail end of that is get a summary of that discussion and the thoughts of the members, and send that back to the standing committee chairman on the House side. So to be very clear, this committee has no authority to pass or fail legislation. That is to say, those are inherent constitutional authorities of the houses of the legislature. So what we will do is have each of the proponents of the legislation talk about the merits of it, and then we'll have questions and answers. And one of the things to consider also is the impact, the fiscal impact on the legislature on the budget. The Constitution of the state of Tennessee says that any act that's passed by the legislature must be paid for. It's how we don't get unfunded legislation. And I've asked Paul Marsh to come up and join us. Paul is actually just finished his Juris Doctor, and he's one of two research analysts for the House Education Committee. I wanted to bring him up to go over the fiscal note and the implications of that on the process. Thank you, sir. Just in terms.
So I believe most of you are familiar with this process, but if you're not, every time legislation is generated, bill is generated and submitted to be heard, a fiscal note is made by the Fiscal Review Department, and the fiscal note essentially estimates the fiscal impact of legislation. Who will pay for it, how it will be paid for it, and how much it will cost. So I believe all of you have this in front of you for House Bill 255 and House Bill 210. It's pretty straightforward. It just gives a basic summary, and then it gives you how they reached the fiscal impact, and then it has the actual legislation attached to it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next up, I'd like to call on Representative Bob Freeman of Davidson County to present his legislation.
Good morning. Thanks, everyone. House Bill 255, and I'm just going to read it real quick for the record. Beginning with fiscal year 2019-2020, the number of instructional positions funded under the BEP must reflect the number of teachers a district is required to employ to meet the requirements of 49.110. Part of the problem that we have here is the comptroller's report from 2016-17. And I'm going to read a brief part of that. It says most districts, 133 out of 140 reviewed, employ more instructional staff than the number of positions generated, and funded by the BEP. This hopes to, change that and fix the problem of us essentially having, an unfunded mandate from the General Assembly to the individual schools, passing that cost on, to the municipalities. And I'm not sure if that's all I do, or if there's.
Are there any questions from the floor?
I'll say, looking at 49.1.104. Looked at district level, I'm sorry, at individual school level, BEP funds, district level. You run into hire personnel to meet this, any staff are funded.
Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Cox. Who can clarify that for us?
It's just for the teachers. Yeah, and I would note that this is not an expansion of services, it's not an expansion of teachers, it's just, clarifying code that the legislature passed, made a mandate to shift the funding away from.
Please, Mrs. Torres.
If you look at the fiscal, you look at the bottom. Mandatory. It depends on every local. There's a local match or is that.
Already at the local or above. And question.
Mr. Lynch?
So, my understanding on this, looking from it from a school superintendent's perspective, is that it just changes the BEP formula from looking at it at a district level to a school level, right? It doesn't address those 9,000 and some teachers outside of that, other than it could help. So on behalf of our association, we want to say thank you. Certainly support the work that TSBA is doing and trying to make this, trying to help us fund some of our teachers that aren't funded.
Yes, Mr. Pruitt.
Question I had for you, does it look, moving it to the school level, does it look at K-3, look at that, or, like, for example, we have some small schools, like 10 kids, kindergarten, 11 in first grade, so when you get the K-3 average, we might get 2.3 teachers, but we've got 4 teachers. What I'm saying is, we have to have those 4 teachers to teach those grades. Is it going to fund those 4 teachers, or is it going to fund based on?
So, and correct me if my understanding is that it takes it away from district level, so a big pool down to the individual. So if because of class size, you'd be required to have 2 teachers, however the math would work out, for individual school is what this would be.
Our interpretation.
At the school.
Correct, so at the
Under
end.
the
ratio, okay?
Other questions or comments? Speak into the microphone, I'm sorry, because we want to make sure, is there one there?
There is one.
A little video on the.
Little lobby.
Sorry about that. David Connor, on behalf of county governments. From a local funding body's perspective, we've talked about this for years, that there's a significant number of positions that are not covered in the formula, but they're required. I think sometimes there's a thought that maybe these are discretionary and they're just deciding to hire a lot of extra teachers. A huge portion of them are required under law. So well, the comptroller's report pointed out about how there's been an additional $300 million that's very much appreciated from the General Assembly to salaries over the last few years. This is a hole that's the same size and sitting there for a while. Makes it challenging, and it also makes it difficult on, before I get into this later, when you discuss the idea of doing a teacher raise, when you've got this large of a pool of teachers that are outside the formula, and there's some money coming down for a raise in the formula. It does.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Thank you, Representative. Appreciate your work. Next on the agenda, I'd like to welcome Representative Tom Leatherwood of Shelby County to present his legislation.
Whichever way.
This one working. Actually, as a former classroom teacher, I could probably do without microphone. Generally, I like to move around a little, so. But also, I'd like to say, after the last one, $400 million, considering that, this is only $60 million, so just a drop in the bucket. This is an easy one. This is legislation dealing with funding for preschool programs operated by our local education agency for children with disabilities. Right now, they are funded by the locals. This legislation would have annual recommended funding amount from the Commissioner of Education to be included. Now, when drawing this up, thought there'd be a little wiggle room in there for the commissioner. We didn't say it will be done by the BEP formula and interjected into the BEP formula. Thought there was a little wiggle room in there. With the fiscal note, though, they, and I can see how they did it, made it as a mandate on the BEP formula. Looking through the fiscal note, actually through the legislation, you'll have the legislation from you, House Bill 210 in Section 2. It says the Commissioner of Education shall annually recommend a funding amount per classroom. Then it goes down, the Commissioners shall take into account the necessary components required to operate the classroom. And to the extent such components are reflected in the BEP, then that will be included at the same cost as it is in the BEP. And so that's the reasoning, which I understand. We wanted to make sure that the commissioner wouldn't say, yeah, they need ABC, but we're only going to fund them, at 10% of what we fund ABC within BEP. Boy, if I'd thought about written down that sentence before, I'd figure out a way to say we need there's ASAP. But I didn't, so that one just came out on the fly. But I do think there's a little bit of wiggle room to control the cost there. At least that was
part of my intent with this. Right now, the locals are getting nothing. I'd say happy to receive anything. So if this legislation would be improved with an amendment to allow a little more flexibility, that the commissioner would have more leeway with those recommendations. Was being, I don't know if I said that. Trust all this clearly enough to you, but that was our intent. With it. Any kind of funding to help out the local LEAs who are serving the children with disabilities, which in section 1B, those disabilities are listed. That's a general overview of intent as well as what we've got here. Questions, comments, or suggestions?
Chair, may I speak?
Mr. Lynch.
Again, Dale Lynch with Tiles. I would also say, on behalf of superintendents and school districts, thank you for this legislation. I know that my phone and email and text and everything blew up this past year when the Department of Ed looked at the typical developing peers, you all remember that phrase, and looking at federal law. And, school systems have to, as we should, be able to take care of children and educate kids at the ages of 3 years of age when they have disabilities. So school systems are required to do that. And what we also found out in the interpretation by the department and looking at federal law is that when you take on that and you have be out here, superintendents, you also you found yourselves making sure that those pre-K classrooms had the same opportunities for those children with special needs children, the special needs children as well as the regular ed kids. Am I right? And so you were looking at services even outside of the public school system to whatever agencies could help with that. Is that, am I halfway getting that one right? So funding, I think you receive IDA funding for this, but not any state group. So this would be very helpful.
Any other questions or comments for Representative Leatherwood? Again, another very powerful piece of legislation. I echo what Mr. Lynch said. We respect what you're doing here today, and as you heard from Paul Marsh and Nathan James, we have no authority here to pass legislation or to, what's that expression, Nathan, the negative side of not recommending the passing of the legislation. Thank you so much for your work. We would hope that you could stay with us for part of the day, maybe even through lunch if possible, both you and Representative Freeman. If you can stay with us, we'd love for you to join us. No other questions or comments? We are, as you can tell from the schedule, we are way ahead of time. Lunch will not arrive here till 11:30. It's too early to eat lunch. We do have a discussion that we will hold during lunchtime. So with Karen King's permission, we would like to move her up in the agenda so she can present item, I'll make sure I get my numbers right, item 6, the component floor proposal. Ms. King?
Yeah.
This, can you decide with the mic up there?
After they ask for the funding for these other two deals, I hope that this particular presentation will be pretty pertinent for everyone here in the room. Probably of all the people here in the room, there are few of us that were there in 1988 when the lawsuit began to be BEP. Everybody, maybe Chris.
Then in 1992, when the BEP came into existence, there was an outlier. Sevier County was the outlier. Well, now there are two outliers that recognize this. That's Sevier County and Davidson County. Over and over again, there are two things that come up about these points when we talk about fiscal capacity. One is adequacy and equity. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Governor Lee and talk to him about it. He asked that I come talk to him about the BEP. And so the issue that I presented to him, we're always going to have adequacy. This committee is going to address, as we have, and as we're hearing today, the formula always going to have to be tweaked. It stays as the way it is. But there's one issue that has not been addressed by the committee, and that is equity. There are school districts that are sort of left behind in the formula. Nathan pointed out yesterday to me that since he's been here, every time that we pass the recommendations on the legislature, I have mentioned that there are districts that will receive nothing in any improvement in the BEP unless it is salary or benefits. So there's a problem there. Over and over again, the problem's been talked about. No one has talked about six. Very simple six. 2007, this floor was put in as part of the thing. Such specific I can't multitask. Address the problem, right now in the morning, the instructional salary, 70% average base, 30% local for instructional salary. Classroom, there's 75% state, and in the non-classroom, 50% state. The funds are distributed to fiscal local districts, each LEA is state. Right now, there is no floor in instructional salary. There is no floor in instructional benefits. There is no floor in classroom. There is a floor in non-classroom. Asked many times why the floor was not extended across the entire formula. I got no answer. I do know that when the 25% floor was into the, and at that time, Sevier County received 8% state funding. We'll turn over to the first half. You'll see that I wrote down basically what was approved by the State Board of Education. The allocation by district across the state. You will see that Sevier County is sitting at 41.52%, 58% local funding. Instructional the same amount for instructional benefits, classroom support. And then if you'll look down, there's not another school district anywhere that is getting that small amount of funding. 2014, the governor of the state on the task force, dividing this year. And there were 5 things that came out of that 200 course that's now sitting every day. 2 of the items that findings of that report, you see that there are outliers. They need to be addressed. Those school districts, the state funding, not receiving funding. Over the next proposal that I have is that we put a floor in this. 2015, Senator, like I would say, in state legislature. And that proposal, the politics grew from a 50% floor to a 65% floor. The district is taking care of it. No one is less than 65%. Cost of that was $83 million. But it has not been brought back up. Unfortunately, here in Kansas, 1992, 2007, that here on this committee with next year, Carol. We could put this floor in. We could even drop this floor down to 45%. And Sevier County would still gain. There's a say, well, what would that cost? The next screen look. Sevier County, if we took that floor in, would receive $5.2 million. Every child in Sevier County would still receive $350 student less than any other school. Davidson County, which is an outlier also, but only in the instructional school, got an $8.3 million. Total cost of this fix is $13.5 million. That's 0.28%, $4.8 billion budget. But this would also, it's not just for every school district, if they ever found themselves. That's why it's Sevier County and not. Problem is tourism. Sevier County's per capita income is 44. Also have every night approximately 150 to 200,000 non-residents. We have a 67% free and reduced population. Those are not indicative of growth in richest county and state county. But by the physical capacity in that county is considered. Others could find themselves in this position. 2 years ago, we had a fire in Sevier County. Called Mary Ann. Everybody in the state of Tennessee at the department level. There was no safety net whatsoever. Issue. We had a tornado that came through your district. We had a catastrophic flood, such as what Chris had. It happened in the major area of the county. They're commercial districts. There's no safety. These are things that often pointed out. We can't change legislation. So these are the kinds of polls we could make a recommendation. So that's my major question today. I've been through questions, and hopefully I've got answers. As I told you, I've been pursuing this call every year. But I've not, up until today, actually continued that discussion. So I presented a problem.
Thank you. Before we open it up for questions and comments, I do want to thank you for your 44 years in Sevier County educating our students there. I appreciate that. And your passion, because you certainly have worked very diligently to put this together. And I know in just conversation before the meeting I started today, you are extremely passionate about what you do. And I know your heart is in the right place. And so through discussion, I do want to open it up for discussion and find out what other comments we might have from the floor and from the other members. And then I would call certainly on Mary Ann Dursky to help us think through the ramifications, because while it made perfectly good sense on paper and with your passionate presentation, ring true to many of us, to most of us perhaps, I still think we need to understand the full-blown ramification of each change that would be recommended by this body. So I wanted to say that because I definitely appreciate sincerely everything that you've said and done.
One of the concerns over and over again, correction, fiscal capacity formula, is if we, and I talked to Dr. Fox, both of those gentlemen said, there was a fix, that if we did a fix, it would impact hundreds of other school districts. And we fully recognize that Sevier County, or Davidson County, or any county that, or school district that found themselves in this position, would want to take anything away from another district under any circumstance. If you look at this last tab in the folder, you'll see that the per child funding for every district. I think maybe this needs to be an annual part of our reporting in the BEP reporting, because when we talk about the BEP, we talk about millions of dollars. And our eyes sort of glaze over. You know, whenever we were listening to the presentations before, we saw 309 million, 59 million. And your eyes sort of glaze over. But if you start looking at it on a per child or per student basis, and I ask any district represented here, anyone that was proposed to be a superintendent, and ask them if they would want to be in a formula that left their district this far behind. And you see that we're $2,700 per child, and that is going backwards each year. Mary Ann and I talk about this often, but she gets a phone call from me so I can see where we're going to. So those are the types of issues, and so the proposal, $13 million, is like a growth fund. We propose funding for growth funds. So this proposal could be district on themselves, it's below the 50% threshold. And this is a growth fund, not within the regular. Thank you. Comments? Questions? Yes.
Chairman,
Yes, Donald?
the chance to visit briefly got started. Of course, at least in my opinion, serving this committee and with TASSER, a lot of discussion every year or so on this item and other items regarding the BEP. And the bottom line is, BEP formula is fully funded in the eyes of the legislature and the government, but education is not fully funded. And that's what happens when we go back home. People talk about, just like she is passionate for hers, you know, we're all passionate for ours as well. And we do all know that under the current formula, the way it's funded, if you take something and give it to anybody, everybody else is affected. It is revenue neutral. And so until we, in my opinion, until we address the BEP on a larger scale, we're going to have a hard time getting consensus around communities and the state representatives of those communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments?
Question, Karen, how stable has that state local?
It goes down every year, David, and the other issue that we have within the formula, receiver formula, box formula, there's no consideration from John Morgan, the comptroller of the state. Sevier County was one of the counties that the Central Business Improvement District and the Tourism Development in Sevier County. In the formulas for the receiver formula, and problems in the formula, funding for strategic tourism development fund and for business improvement. Those sales tax earned out at $360,000, and now is at $4.8 million, are taken away from Sevier County to fund the Central Business Improvement District and tourism development. When the calculation is done in the fiscal capacity formula, the assumption is that those funds stay with Sevier County Schools. It does not. When we talked to John Morgan said that's wrong. And the legislation was passed the next year that we couldn't change the Seaver formula, we couldn't change the Fox formula, we couldn't change the law because the law was passed after it happened in Sevier County. These are the kinds of issues that, you know, the longer we delay, the greater issues are for Sevier County. And as I want to point out is the children of Sevier County and education in Sevier County does belong to the state.
There's no question about that, Ms. King. This is about basic education for every student across this entire state. There's no question about that. We never want to lose sight of that. And so, Ms. Dursky, I want to turn to you if there's someone else like Ben, Mr. Torres. Yeah.
I had a question. So you said that this, based on the amount of stuff, where would you think that 13.5 growth?
It could grow. I don't know how much it could grow because of the complications of the formula and the fact that to generate this number, you have the numbers for 145 districts. Mary Ann Mike could answer this. The data that I got specifically came from the Department of Education.
Any other comments? Ms. Dursky?
It's Mary Ann Dursey, Department of Education. I have a question first about something you said, Karen, if you don't mind. You talked about enhancements to the formula outside of the instructional don't benefit anyone who is on minimum funding. That is true. But this proposal would not affect that. It would not. Okay.
This would just Marion asked the question, would this proposal help us to receive funding whenever, for instance, when the safety security funds came out, Sevier County received nothing because we were threshold. And so then we came back and they gave us a good amount of funding. That we do need to rest assured that we're using the BEP formula. Distribution of every penny is distributed. And because of quote unquote the physical capacity, where we follow the formula, we are not, unless it's salary and benefits, we do not receive any.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood. A few comments on behalf of the department in no particular order as we look at this type of proposal. One concern or one thought from the department is that this is a proposal that benefits 2 out of 142 districts, and that the funding that would fund this proposal could potentially go to the other districts spread among them. So that is just something to, I think, be aware of and to consider. And it seems that the review committee over the past few years has been moving away from setting arbitrary or kind of one-off requirements or solutions that would benefit just a few districts here or there. The concern being if you crack the door, there are other one-off concerns that may come in, other outliers that may arise. And so we would want to be mindful of that and kind of think through what else could be on the horizon as we move forward if additional districts were to fall below that 50% threshold, that would increase cost, obviously. And there are possibly other districts who could come forward with an outlier position. And I think lastly, the task force that Governor Haslam created in 2014 that met over the course of several years, one of the outcomes of that was the BEP Enhancement Act of 2015, which made some changes to the formula that are now in law. And also, I think out of that came a supplemental appropriation for Sevier County to recognize, I believe it was the tourism development zone issue, where that much of that sales tax or all of that sales tax from the zone is deferred.
And that, yes, that came at $1.8 million. $1.8 million was where we were 2014. Increase amount of money now that is coming, I'm not sure, September, to be $2 million. Another issue that came out, and again, this is because of the uniqueness of the economy of the county. And the other reason why I think Davidson is now calling us, all of this is based on tourism. Tourism is a unique thing. People who work in tourism, minimum wage. A lot of money is generated, but it costs a lot of money for tourism. There's no accommodation right now in the fiscal for that. So that $1.8 million now, $4.2 million last September, and I anticipate on any new business that is coming to Sevier County since 2007, their sales tax totally goes to pay for the enhancement for tourism. There's no growth fund, new business. That the revenue from the calculated.
Yes, Mr. Eby.
How is that decided on the tourism dollars?
We are a county, Sevier County is a county school district. The tourism dollars, they did not support county school districts. They say the state and county to support education. Now, we do get receive supplements. They provide the drinking for this hour. They want that totally for their schools. And we sit in a very, very unique place. That's why we call an outline.
Mr. Steve, would you address this, just this surfacing in my mind with regard to what King just said? So the tourism dollars do not go to the county, is what you're saying, they go to the city?
They
All
go
of
to
them?
the city
All
of
of them?
Sevierville. They go to the city of Sevierville,
Okay.
City of Sevierville has a central business.
So then in determination, Ms. Dursky, the equalization process, is there something within equalization that, for lack of a better way of saying this, needs to be addressed relative to what Ms. King just said? Because I would assume, and I should not do that, in counties where their fiscal capacity is stronger, we're not dealing with a tourism situation. I just want to help, I want to understand this better, where we know there's something else that needs to be done as opposed to the direct proposal that King is making, because we still want to balance out and have that fairness across the board, not do something that mention this and cause some districts to lose out on funding. Help me understand.
It's my understanding that it would require a change to the CBER and the TASER model to account for the fact that those tax dollars were not being shared with the schools, but were in fact being diverted, if you will, to the, either the tourism or the central business zone. And those are changes in formulas that the department does not control. That would be a TASER issue and a fever.
Okay. When Harry Green was active, Ms. Patrick talked with Harry Green. The problem is, again, if you fix this, it impacts others. And you have one district, now two, that are called outlaws, and they simply do not. And the problem is, we're spiraling backwards, continue to spiral.
Here's a question from Mr. Lynch.
Would we still be having this conversation? Yes. One. At BEP had even
We would, yeah, I think we would still be having this conversation. And the conversation becomes more critical as the growth in the central business improvement district, tourism development, and tourism grows. As we grow, as Sevier County tourism grows, which it is growing at a phenomenal rate, the hole in the bucket for education is growing larger. And the growth is coming from the cities, and the funding with the half of the sales tax should be coming back to the school district, which we are receiving credit for in the formula. It's growing. And we can't fix the physical capacity. Fix the physical capacity impacts everyone. So, and we've got, right now we have a ceiling on that $1.8 million. And that was nice when we got it. And of course, this year when we did the streamlined sales tax, if you're mindful, the streamlined sales tax was distributed based with collection, sales tax, and contribution to the state of Tennessee. That is now changing to destination sales tax. One school district in the state of Tennessee is going to be impacted by the change. Others are going to receive an increase in sales tax. Your county is going to lose $3.8 million when the streamlined sales tax. Again, an outlier. And there's nothing that we as a school district can do to save ourselves except for asking.
A couple of comments related to what Karen's talking about. There's been discussion, and I'm going to link this a little bit to pilots. There have been discussion in the past about when a local government decides to enter into a payment in lieu of tax agreement to incent a business investment. That still needs to be counted towards their fiscal capacity because they're making a voluntary choice to say we're going to waste some of our taxes. Those are different, in my opinion, from these tourism development zones. In that case, I mean, they are making that decision. They're bringing investment in. They usually have a fixed period of time where they decline over time, and eventually they are going to get revenue from those sources. In this case, this was a decision not made by the county or the school system, but by the municipalities to set up these zones to redirect the sales tax revenue away. It's never going to come back to the school system. And those zones, I think initially they thought they were going to be fairly limited, and they really took in pretty much the entire municipal limits. So it's a redirection of a huge amount of the sales tax base, but they continually get held, given credit for the fact that they're generating all this sales tax that in no way is going to go to education or ever could go to education.
David, if we were to go to court, if we were to question about this in court, it would be called a family sales tax. There are 5 districts in the state of Tennessee that have a family sales tax. But there are none. Memphis, Davidson, Knox, and Sevier. None of those school districts have anything even comparable to what's going on in the county. And then, without a floor, without some type of floor in formula, without some consideration of the formula. Sevier County now is at 41% funded. When 2007, we were at 52%. We are spiraling downward in a larger and larger pace as tourism grows. And again, tourism dollars are one of the major funding issues for education. And it's almost if we use this analogy that we're a parent, we're all in this, we're all a team, and the parent that is contributing the third most money in the state of Tennessee, their child cannot even get a uniform right now from the BEP.
Any other questions or comments? Recommendations? Yes.
So, I mean, if I'm going to occur, still, would this affect you? The 13.5 of the pro. District going to. Usually fill in the bucket, pull in the bottom.
Well, I think we've already got a floor. We go back to one screen. We already have a floor in the non-classroom. And if you look at the sheet that the first tab, and I'm sorry that an old educator always likes people to be able to see what they're looking at. If you'll go back to the first yellow tab, here, in the handout that you have, you'll see that there's no one really right now that is close to the hole, other than Sevier County. It'll take a while for them to get there. But this is a safety net for any school district. We've already got the safety, we've got the safety net and the non-classroom. We need to put the safety net in the other two. And again, I realize this group cannot make a change, but I would ask that this group, at least including their report consideration.
This will definitely be included in the report. I think that we take this under advisement, what that's worth. Those that are in control of the formulas and other aspects of this body of work heard you today. And so we, at the bare minimum, are going to include this in the report. Thank you so much for your time. And lunch is not here, but why don't we take a 5-minute break, reconvene, and go into the next presentation unless we're closer. Let's take a 15-minute break, if that's okay with everyone. 11:15, we'll be reconvening promptly at 11:15.
You didn't want to Coke or anything?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm not following you. Okay, so, right, right. Yeah, but I guess so right now, okay, so Hamlin, much smaller, and that's like, what I understand. So we, our county, and it's similar to, we've not like, you have kind of split it. Right, so, our county, and we have a lot of, not as much as we would have, and we would have $50 right from the city by state law. But now, she is saying, is that they set up these, they don't get them. Pay for their infrastructure. But they're live. That's something. Is there something we can do today?
No, I think the local decision.
And when they did that, right. Yep. So have they made that forever? Could they change it? Yeah.
Our county, we have a city county system.
Or city, county.
County system. Oh, yeah. 69 holiday. So what happened was, 8 years ago, our city was like a rate number was 1969. All the way. And soon, they did. But they had continued to contribute. From 69 until we got a city administrator that said, wait a minute, we need all those tax dollars. So they, and won. And so now we're paying back, county's paying back. 89. Yeah, that's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, well, I live in that one. So that one, yeah, I mean, yeah. They're gonna.
Oh, I think you're on it. What's the rest? Right?
That Bluetooth working?
Yeah.
Reaching out, good. That's one way they can do it.
Oh, wow.
All the fun stuff. Are you gonna sit in your place? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be on. Well, thankfully, yeah. Already talked about it. Yeah, I miss those. So, I know. I'll just be watching everything on TV. And my sister, I think she was on maternity. But she kept taking shows where they're like, my sister's like the trash can. Nothing left. So guilty pleasure to go out.
See you later. Our fruits get.
Yeah. I work for
Okay. Sure.
Thanks for coming in.
Right away.
They work in an apartment complex, right off of like 440, like beach building. Yeah, I was in a house, 8 million rooming, 3 million work.
Well, look at it.
So it was very nice. Overspreading.
Those opposed to that.
Oh, yeah.
Housing is going to be forced to be occupied. And so each bill is now for one.
Oh, really?
State law. So I didn't know. I will. They're really good at communicating. You're okay with something like that. I wish.
Waited until election day last year. Not last year, last week. Yeah, last time. Yeah. Now it's early voting. Yeah, early voting now.
How are you?
I'm good. Get that done. I don't wait till the last minute again. Voting on actual election day. You know,
3 months? Yeah, yeah.
special something or a runoff. Special election, runoff. Real election.
Actually, once you fix it up.
Sarah, you and your husband, you're not golfers, are you?
We're not what?
Are you golfers?
No, we didn't go to the meeting.
I just wondered.
We got us that way, but yeah, no, thanks. Golf is wonderful, but no, he's not a golfer.
Okay. I didn't know.
I kind of wish we'd gone up there just to see it, because I do think it, but we'll have to go back.
That's right.
Yeah. I still want to go to Ireland.
Just so everyone knows, Nathan is checking on the food. It's here and it's being set up, so we may very well just have you, in just a minute or two, gather go get your food and bring it back in. So let's just wait a couple more minutes and he'll tell us when it's ready. Okay? Thank you.
My son and his wife, they are 2 months left.
Oh.
Right behind you. Yeah. They sent us pictures. They sent us the ultrasound pictures yesterday. Yeah.
I'll have a big ultrasound in like a week and a half, and that's
long time with my first, and I kind of thought with this one I would, I was kind of ready to be an attorney, but tell somebody it's really hard to know what to wear. You're in the in-between. Nothing fits, yeah. So 2 months, what does that make them do in spring? Late spring?
Yeah, late spring.
At least not summer. I know. I had to do that with our first, he was born in August. Yeah, well, do they know? Not yet? Will they find out, or do you know?
They think next time they go there.
Yeah, I feel like we found out about 12 weeks.
The only thing they were really looking for that time, she runs, Mama runs, they have 2 men in the family. Yeah, her.
One heartbeat, have they determined that?
And they, yeah, she's one.
I keep having dreams, even though they told me it's one, it's two.
Yeah.
That's good to
I
know.
always say that's my nightmare. I can't handle, I was feeling so too anal and stressed to have more than one small child.
So you do it. I have a few friends who've had twins in the last few years. What?
My daughter was like that. She said, yeah, it's all good over with. I mean, hers is.
In theory, I think that's right. I had thought that at some point.
Just
but yeah.
informed me that it's going to be 11:30 before the lunch is ready. It's here, but it's getting set up. So I do want to just draw to your attention, you can continue to talk, but while you're standing around, let's just be casual and comfortable. Because during lunch, we are going to have open discussion at your will. You can sit and talk to each other individually, or we can talk collectively. It's up to you. But I want to. Oh, okay. Oh, new update. It'll be ready in 5 minutes. But I do want to draw to your attention, on top of your many papers in your possession, you have a document from TASI, the Special Education Association, that was emailed to a couple of us on the board and to Sarah and Nathan. So we want to draw your attention to that for your review, and if you want to discuss it during lunch, with folks or collectively, we can do that. We also have the priority voting spreadsheet that you all received electronically from Nathan, because we thought it was important to share this so you can see when you sit down and after you grab your lunch, priorities 1 through 5 and the way that individuals voted. So we can have an open discussion about that. You know that we took the top 5 votes and submitted the letter to the governor as well as to the commissioner of Veterans. We can talk about this as well, since we did not have a prior opportunity to do so before. Anything else you want to add, Nathan?
In terms of the vote, we just want to be very transparent with all of the results we got on that survey. So we are going to have lunch in 5 minutes now. We have lunch for 30, so that takes care of the members and the state board supporting staff. I think that brings us up to about 25 or 26, and we were also including our legislative guests and our presenter, Tara, who doesn't sit on the committee, but is joining us, and so I would say once those folks get through, we could look to see what else is left, but we were budgeting just to take care of it. Is that better? So, he's ready. Just ask for the bring food by me.
Nathan has given us the 2 thumbs up for food is ready. Please, at your convenience, go out and get your plate and bring it back in the room. And we do suggest that you just keep your microphones turned off for a casual conversation during lunch. And we'll be back in here in just a couple of minutes. Thank you all.
Look at it wrong. So I don't know if it's, I don't know.
I always give. Cut all my forty. Half.
I was forgot to that. Like the recycling out on the second Tuesday and vote on the third and fifth Tuesday of every month. Yeah, exactly.
She's a lawyer. Yes. What's up?
What do you think, folks? That's what I want to hear. I think there's not be much left over. How is it, man? Nathan. Huh? It's good. Oh, it's good, yeah. So let's have the blue book ready to go.
It already is.
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't know you did that.
All John will keep at home, so I've learned to just deal with it.
All right. Good.
I know several of you all are still eating. Can you hear me? Just wanted to let you know that we will reconvene in 10 minutes at noon, and we'll pick up with our next presenter, which is Ms. Mary Ann Dursky, and then we'll proceed on, unless you all want to have any open conversations about the priority list, we can certainly do that first. So you let me know if you'd like to discuss the priority list or the documentation from passage. Anybody have any ideas or suggestions there? If you want to leave it as is, or no comments? I'll give you till noon.
I'll just say that seeing the priority list, other people, what they think are important, is helpful to me. Next year, when we put this out, I can have products and things I have.
Couple of thoughts that I had, and so you all can think about it, and we can ask Nathan to poll you all and determine a couple of things for next year. The timing to me was a little bit strange this year. I would prefer for myself, and I think you might feel the same way, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. We have presentations and we're in person. We can hear from different stakeholders who want to come before us. That does give us an opportunity to know what issues and challenges and opportunities are before we and get your vote. You said, Bob, I think it is titled when you do hear some others, some of the concerns that are in the field, and it might better inform a lot of moving forward. And do our level best, Nathan, because I know you are trying to get all of those over the phone sessions that we need to get together, as well as be in person, but later this time. We do have to get that letter completed and sent to the governor and the commissioner of education in a timely manner so that they can, while they're going through the budget process, have that. So, anyway.
I do think we have a good process. I think the process, by getting the top one, the process, doing it that way.
Nathan suggests that I ask, timing question, what would work make sense from your perspective?
In terms of when do you need that? Have it be most of
Agencies right now, we have to take the first, is September 7th, somewhere around that time frame. I think as long as mid-September.
Good information, thank you.
With that timing in mind.
That's what I'm saying, that's what I'd like. Does that make sense? Because if we met in August and we were surveying, it depends on when we would meet in August. Met late July, early August, we did surveying soon after, get those priorities. Perhaps even have a phone conversation, phone call, to discuss those priorities before the priorities actually get a logical. End of June, that certainly makes sense for me, but, you know, if there's any reason why we could not, that's what I'm asking.
So
Is there any reason why we could not?
I don't think there's any reason if we can actually get a quorum. What we find out is when we try to do something the second 2 weeks of June and the first 2 weeks of July, is that so many people are on vacation that we're unable to get a quorum before to transact. So that's ultimately why there was one date set for this, and then that was changed because of a whole lot of, you know, if you look around here, you're looking at some of the busiest people in the state of Tennessee. And so to get enough of them together to transact business, that's the real challenge. It's like it would almost be easier in May or at the tail end of the school year. It's like maybe right after legislative session is over, because you'd be able to take a look at the budget, and then we could get together and we could do a priority survey for 2 weeks prior, and then come together with everything tabulated out, and then talk about it then. We'd still be ahead of the power curve, and we'd be able to take care of it in May's time frame that way, not interfere with everybody's beach trips the way that the tail end of June, the first part of July did.
One thing that, whenever I have to do surveys of this nature, in order to get a quorum for the things that I'm responsible for, to me, when we have a bit of a longer window, more weeks included, I think it gives you a greater shot at or a chance at having a quorum. I know we had to redo surveys so that we could ensure that we had more people. The other thing too is it's incumbent upon every one of us to respond to that survey. We have no way of knowing when individuals are not responding, if they're even coming. And a lot of times what will happen is no one are not responding. We could have had a quorum and we just didn't know it. So those surveys are critically important that we choose the most appropriate day for those people. So let me just clarify one more thing. What are we saying that the May, vote now on a May, June, July? I know it's hard for you all to say, we don't know schedules now, but I think we need to at least say, let's look at the window of end of May, July 30th. It's a pretty wide, very wide window. That's too much. And you can ask questions.
So, and let me just ask you informally, is it easier for you all to get together in May than it is to find out? I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. Anybody say that it's harder to get together in May than it would be in June or July. So,
I just know from our experience, normally have, you actually have a hard time scheduling.
well, the hardest one was last year was, Mayor McDonald wasn't able to join us, and just we're trying every way to get him accommodated, but, and of course, we have a board meeting as well, the state board does, so. But if y'all are interested in a, in-person meeting at the tail end of the year, so that we're not interfering necessarily with your summer vacation, and then just anything during that period of time would be maybe by telephone, and so, you know, maybe a.
For the record, instead of a beach trip, I ended up in February having quadruple bypass. So,
Glad you're here with us now. So we'll look at months and dates and close that out earlier rather than later, so we get a form. Thank you. We're not going to stand on ceremony, but yes.
Special education.
Any of our educators in the room that want to comment? Probably I can't hear.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I think it was, just looking
We're talking about two different things. That's what. You're talking about the TASI report,
He's talking
right?
about special.
Yeah, I just make sure. Yeah, that does include that.
We have not.
Nathan's reminding me that we just received it. I think that's something certainly. Any other comments from our school district?
There is no question that children are coming to our schools now with greater need, different reasons. And I think if we're asking the department to look at that, what are the numbers in special education now versus what we were looking at a year or two ago, and what type of needs do the options 1 through 9 or 10 now, how are they being funded? We're asking more and more of our special education teachers, inclusion and other measures. I think that would be, this is a very good document from practitioners who are dealing with special education every single.
Mary Ann, is this a reasonable request of the department? Out what the recommendation is from Kathy?
we may need some clarification on this. Exactly.
Okay. That report came from Robin. Okay. Comments, and Mary Ann, we'll go ahead and move into your item on the agenda for the updated book.
This is the,
We do not have a copy of this, but we will receive it on email.
it'll be sent out. This is the annual update of the book as it's known. It is basically a condensed version of the book that highlights the components and the unit costs for the particular year. This blue book has been updated to reflect the unit costs that are in the formula for 1920. And basically, the format is basically unchanged from prior years. It lists components, and in this case, it lists the ratios at which we fund these various positions and construction components. That's listed there. The instructional benefits, include insurance, the TCRS contribution, and I get in there. I will note this year, just of interest perhaps, that the TCRS contribution rate is a blended rate. It takes into consideration that we now have a certain number of our employees in the legacy program, a certain number in the new hybrid program, with a weighted average of 2 funding. That was a change. In the classroom component, this lists basically the unit cost for all of the various items in the classroom component, materials, supplies, travel, the positions that are in the classroom component, which refers to educational assistant. Ratios are there. Additional positions that are in the classroom. Again, have the current CDR non-classroom section that takes into consideration school secretaries, capital health. Again, this is basically a condensed, and a condensed version. That longer version is being updated, and then we're updating that here next. This blue book is found on the state board website. We refer any number of people to it, stakeholders outside of the education. It's a very useful handy reference. Boils it down to its kind of the basic. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Everybody else knows APM versus AD. Notice all of the local level, we talk about it. I understand one of them is people enroll versus people who attend. Why are we using ADM when I understand
BEP changed, it was ADA prior to the BEP. BEP changed average daily membership. What has not changed is the number of students using split of local taxes in multi. So in situations such as yours, local taxes are split split according to average daily attendance. That is in state law. That we use weighted full-time equivalent average. That is right now the only thing. That's a holdover in state law. That we are frequently asked.
You don't use that in transportation.
No, we use average daily transit. How many students are actually?
One quick question is, when the, changed a few years ago, for a teacher now entering the profession, takes them on the new plan, 36 years. Retirement. Is that accurate? Is that right?
I'm gonna have to defer. I have not.
Our superintendent, is that Chris, Karen? DCRS, right, to be fully vested now for a new teacher. Changes went into effect in 2 years ago, right? So if you were a teacher coming in at the age of 22, I was thinking that it took them 36 years. And I is that wrong?
We just think about the, a lot of those.
No other questions or comments from Ms. Durski? Thank you very much. Our next agenda item is from Tara Berthel with Comptroller's Office of Research and Education Accountability, presenting on teachers' salaries. And I believe this is the first time this committee is going to do this. Is that correct?
Good afternoon, everybody. I know a lot of you are here, and a lot of I was doing research on this. I interviewed as many people as I possibly could, but I will introduce myself. I'm Tara Berthel. I'm a research analyst for the office. And not familiar with our office, what we do is we provide healthy information to the students. Often they come to us at the end of session and ask us a question. They want follow-up information. Summer and fall, hopefully, we do a deep dive and research. So last spring, we were asked to look at 4 primary questions, some of which we were able to answer and some that we couldn't. I'll explain more as I go through what we found, but I'm going to save you the anticipation of our main point. It's very difficult to talk about teacher salaries. We were asked how much new state funding was used to pay salaries, how much new local funding was used by districts to pay teacher salaries, how much of this funding was used for non-salary items, and did districts spend state funds and for teacher salaries on allowable purposes. The district court, at least, and Mary Ann can probably attest to this, it's not possible to connect state and local revenue sources to specific expenditures. We just don't do our accounting in a way that lets us track our funds or spending. That being said, we did still find some interesting trends over the last few years. So the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to go over. Since 2015, the state has added funds for instructional salaries. We looked in this report, 2015 to 2018, and you see there was an increase in the salary unit cost of about 14%. Since then, we've added on a couple of years. That has increased almost 20%. Sometimes that new funding is tagged by the media as a 2% raise, and what that really means is we've raised that salary unit cost in the BEP formula. You know, that doesn't necessarily equate to a raise for everyone. The salary unit cost figure is the primary driver of increasing state funding for salaries, but a 2% increase in that does not automatically increase the raise in every paycheck. Fiscal capacity plays a big part in this. Districts don't get the same amount of funds, but also the flexibility that's afforded in the BEP formula also plays a role in that. The formula calculates funding for positions, but as I'll explain in a minute, districts have a lot of flexibility in how they decide to spend their education dollars. To recap though, all districts have received additional state funds for instructional salaries, and increasing the salary unit cost figure is the primary mechanism we have in the formula to add more funding. The Department of Education does collect information on total salary figures for all licensed instructional personnel, but we were trying to answer how districts use new state funds for salary. The data that the state collects tells us a lot, but it's not that specific piece of information. So we did do a survey of directors of schools last summer, and of the 100 or so districts that responded, found that districts used their new instruction funds for primary purposes. They gave raises and they hired new staff. Most districts that responded to our survey gave raises in those years. The state made investments in raising teacher pay. You can see there was a big jump from 14-15 to 15-16. That was the first year the state increased the salary unit cost formula in that time period that we were looking at. Between 2015 and 2018, the average classroom salary increased about 10%, almost $3,000. From $47,979, almost $51,000. This growth made Tennessee the third fastest growing state in the Southeast for instructional teacher salaries, behind North Carolina and Georgia. In addition to using additional BEP instructional salary funds to provide raises for staff that is already employed, districts can also use their funds to hire additional instructional. The BEP calculated an increase in instructional positions 1.84% for all the districts statewide during this time period. Districts increased their overall instructional staff by about 1.97%, which is about 1,400 for the same time period. And we talked about this earlier. Almost all districts employ more staff than the number of positions generated by the BEP. 2018, districts employed about 10,000 more positions. In roundtable discussions and from the survey, most directors cited the need to fund additional staff positions beyond those generated in the formula as the most significant constraint on increasing teacher salaries in time period. Because districts employ more staff that are covered by BEP funding, the available state and local dollars are earmarked for salaries, they have to stretch over more teachers than the staff positions generated in the formula. Another reason why that 2% raise at the state level does not equal out to a 2% raise for everyone. It's also important to keep in mind that for every additional position hired beyond those calculated in the BEP, not counting federal, the district pays 100% of the salary, health insurance, retirement, and other personnel benefits local. So the state has made some significant investments in teacher pay. We were asked, is a local piece. In short and overall, yes, they did. Local funding and state funding increased at about the same rate, about 13%. It varies significantly by district though, and we did not have the capacity district by district. It's important to keep in mind that while local districts must match state funding with required levels of funding, districts do not have to increase their local funding at the same rate state increases. While the law requires districts to maintain their previous year's budget funding of instructional salaries, there is no requirement that local dollars must increase or that any local increase has to be salary. So, to look at local funding, we compared that cushion between the required local match and the additional above and beyond funding that districts allocated per pupil. We found that the cushion increased slightly, again, statewide, about 51% to 53% during the year. The gap indicates that local districts increased spending from local dollars over the past few years, and overall total local dollars that were budgeted for schools increased by about $400 million, and the per pupil increase is about $450 per pupil. This is really the question that legislators wanted to know. How much local funding was spent on increasing? The state gave all this new funding to raise teacher salaries. What did local do? Fortunately, like I said, that's not really something we can answer. We joke in OREA that there are two mantras we have to repeat when we're talking about district finances. First, revenues do not equal expenditures. And second, we all know this, the BEP is a funding formula, not a spending plan. And I'm serious, Marianne, we're investing in toasters and wallpaper because if I have to call you or Brad one more time and have you guys just remind me of that on the phone, revenues are not expenditures. We can't track them the same way. The BEP does have a few parameters on how they must spend BEP. Instructional salary funds have to be spent on salaries. And for some districts, salary funds cannot be used for benefits. But overall, formula gives districts a lot of flexibility in how they can spend their dollars. As a result, not trace expenditures back to revenue sources. For example, when a district increases their spending on teacher salaries, it's not possible to determine what portion, if any, of the revenues that they're using is from state funds that were generated, say, through classrooms or non-classroom. We just know overall how much local funding is. Further complicate this, districts report their expenditures in line with what's called the comptroller's chart of expenses. This way of reporting expenditures does not align with how the funding is calculated. For example, the BEP calculates health insurance funding for instructional positions over here and non-instructional positions over here. But when districts report their expenditures, they put all those health insurance expenditures into one line item. So in light of these limitations I just outlined, we tried to get a little creative. We used a few proxy measures to look at district spending trends, and we couldn't distinguish state versus local revenues for the expenditures. But we found that after hiring additional positions, rising costs of health insurance premiums are the largest constraint on increasing fees, according to directors of schools. Districts try to stay competitive with the benefits that they offer in order to attract and retain employees. But the average insurance premiums during this time increased about 17%. about 9,300 to almost 11,000 per. And when the General Assembly increases the salary unit cost for teachers, it also does the same for the unit cost used for support positions at the same rate. For positions like education assistants, secretaries, bus drivers, about 4% during that time period. Does this district have to stay competitive for teacher pay? Many directors told us about issues they've been having teaching positions like bus drivers. Did districts spend state funds for teacher salaries for unallowable purposes? I mentioned earlier, and the districts have a lot of flexibility in their spending. There are a few parameters for how, in the BEP, for how districts must use funds. 2016 BEP Enhancement Act did include a couple of provisions relative to teacher salaries. First, districts have to maintain their budgeted level of local funding for salaries as stated in the prior year. Second, states cannot use state funds for salaries to offset local expenditures. We reviewed how the department checks this requirement, and we confirmed that all the districts have complied since 2017, the first year that salary equity funding. We weren't asked about this. It was we wanted to cover as well. I won't focus on this one too much, but we did include a policy consideration about salary equity funding. It's a separate allocation from the BEP, about $14.5 million, goes to 83. The intent when this was first added was that these funds are there to boost pay. Districts are not supposed to use it to hire new positions. You'll see that the amounts vary considerably by district. Coffee County receives about $1,000 a year. Cumberland County receives over half. Our consideration was just that the state hasn't really evaluated the impact of these funds or which districts should and shouldn't be eligible since we started the funding in 2015. So we included a policy consideration, department to develop some more transparent processes, determining eligibility and requiring districts to maybe report how they use those funds to raise salaries. And our report included a policy consideration that the General Assembly may wish to require districts to report how they spent their BEP funds for instructional salaries, and suggested that maybe an in-depth salary survey of select districts to be conducted periodically to kind of more picture of these district salary trends. Public Chapter 153, which is passed this spring, this does require school districts to report to the Department of Education how any future increase in state funding for instructional salaries and wages. The new law also requires the department to report this information on how school districts spend any future increases to this body, to be a committee, and requires the committee to include the information in the report. And just for purposes, these are the questions asked. That our report is in front of you. It's also
Are there any questions? Mr. Henson.
See a correlation. Proposed legislation. Has to have. That's a. Glad that you have title hiring staff out. That number of.
that was from 7.
That's total.
So, okay, that figure, I realize it's set for that bill. Figures I use do not include. Maybe that's the discrepancy. I don't know. It didn't consistently match, but yeah, that was in 17. I don't know. This will know. If I recall correctly, we pulled just the classes. Because our interpretation of that bill was that only classes.
Because it was just dealing with class size.
Class size. Yeah, we pulled state and locally funded classes. This would be all instruction. Not just classroom.
Ten thousand teachers over what the BEP is. You're talking about, Chris?
10,000 instructional. 72 classrooms.
This
So
includes
local districts,
principals.
local districts are picking up 100% of those 10,000 people. Right? Okay, just want you to say that.
Mr. Eby?
I think we see one of the biggest challenges we have is qualified teachers. Where do we rank overall?
Recall that offhand, it might be in the report, I don't know. Offhand. We're not, I think we were in maybe the top 5, but again, I'm off the cuff.
Top 5 out of
I mean, maybe like 12, they were looking at for what the,
Speaking of that, it is included in our annual BEP report. So if you look at the State Board of Education website and you pull up last year's report that we voted on, there is, at least using last year's dollars, that figure, and it's actually compiled by the NEA. And it will be part of our report as well. So when we're dealing with it in the next couple of meetings, that will be there. But right on our website, 2018 BEP.
Are there other questions? Oh, yes.
The salary equity funding, wide disparity, say, between Coffee County. How is that?
so my understanding, it was, it's based on, I think, we started in fiscal year 2015, and the amount was divided proportionately based on district average weighted salary. That year for 2015 was, the latest data we had was FY 13 for average weighted salary. So if your average weighted salary was the lowest compared to the average, you received more of this salary equity funding. The closer you were to the average, the less you received. That makes sense. It was based on proportionality compared to other districts below the state average.
Yes, Mayor McDonald.
Just a follow-up.
Salary equity?
Yes.
No, it's a separate allocation, not in the BEP. Separate line item in the budget.
I realize that, but I'm wondering if the formula would.
Well, I mean, average weighted salaries, possibly argue that take into account fiscal capacity. To lower your fiscal capacity, the likelier your salary is lower. It would indirectly take that into account. Average weighted salary, if anybody isn't sure of that, it takes into account experience as well as health insurance benefit costs. So it's kind of like an even comparison across all districts. Where one district may have a really high actual salary, but when you weight it, one a way we can compare Cumberland County to Nashville.
Other questions, comments? Yes.
Very comprehensive. We were looking at this, actually, we looked at it, played the factor, affecting teacher salaries, seeing declining.
Not something I looked at directly. Directly the part that I can.
Mr. Cox?
So,
I'm sure there's a report on, complicated part is that when the state gives money, so many districts are already above that threshold. They don't really have to increase. Many do, because if they got more state money, higher teachers, they're gonna chip in, but unless they're on that threshold of local match, there's no level push they can add. Right, the local funding doesn't go as far when that and starts. And that's what I meant was look at this at a district by district level, where you take out the top biggest 5 districts, that cushions a lot, not 50 from the district. Very different when you have larger. You want to like advocate like 5 more people for our office. That.
So when you did this study, this came from you said from the general, or requested to do the
Yes.
study on their behalf. So if we had a request based on this conversation, you're saying you may or may not be able to capacity of your staffing? Oh, you were strictly for, okay.
Well,
Nathan's educating.
yeah, Nathan could under pressure. Yeah, I mean, I won't say yes or no.
How's
The
your
things that, and based on our capacity. You know, if there's some requests, I won't say no, I won't say yes. Ask the comptroller.
We'll go through the proper channel. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mayor McDonald?
Seems that Nasser has done some of this study. Suffolk County. Actually, I know we met.
Yeah, and I talked to Michael a lot about this, trying to figure out, looked at this, is there a way, and there is, like I said, when you dive down at the individual county level, you can start looking at our county maxed out of their state average, you know, their actual fiscal capacity versus willingness versus ability. You could look at that. That's one way to look at fiscal effort. It's kind of just beyond our ability to do put all of that in here, but that's one way, Michael and I went back and forth to figure out a way. There's a spreadsheet that the department creates where it has how much the state allocates in total, the local match versus the local actually, and break it down per pupil. And so you can show a percentage of, and there's sort of a trend line where that gap is. That's what we looked at for that spreadsheet.
Maybe we'll get that sent out.
Yes. We would appreciate it if you would provide that to us. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
So one
Yes.
final point. You, legislative intent was the districts were using $8. This report proves that that did happen.
So, the department has a couple mechanisms for checking. And so what we can do is look at how much total state funding did you get in instructional staff? How much, did you spend at least what you got in state funding? Okay. Met the requirement. That's the simplest and the most, I guess that's the only way we can really determine, did you at least spend your state appropriation received on teacher salary? Every district, for the most part, spends more than just their state appropriation. So that's where it's difficult to figure out how much more local money, was it local money, or did you take state money that was in the classroom and kind of pull it into instructional salaries? Dollar bills are not flagged instructional classrooms, so we can't tell where that extra money came from. That makes sense?
It does, and the local portion, the locals are keeping up with that state percentage.
So total local funding kept up with total state funding increases. Not by category, not by instructional salary classrooms, but just in total, locals added 12.8%, the state added 13%.
So I know this is not my path, but I would say that this body then, once this is reported to the general, I think practitioners and superintendents and educators ought to say, okay, now that this has been done, what we want is what can we do to hire teachers in our Tennessee public classrooms and get them to stay. I mean, that's where we are with this report. Now that this is, I think that has to happen next. How can we get more teachers? That's got to be. Now that this is there, what's going to take people to say, I want to be a teacher? They do it for the long term, not for 2 years and leave.
That's a discussion that I have all the time in my day job because I work closely with school districts. And as a matter of fact, Bobby Cox is on a committee that we created in education as a pathway. We do all this work to try to find ready, trained, prepare and train a workforce for advanced manufacturing, IT, healthcare, you name all the other sectors, but what are we doing about it? Challenge within the school. Conversation centers often around the fact that you have a ready-made workforce in front of you, day in and day out in the classroom. And so what are you doing individually as principals, administrators, directors of schools? And so that's one of the things that the directors of schools are looking at. It's also society at large. It's about your family at home. And you hear it for a variety of reasons. So we all have to start, in my humble opinion, as a narrative that says we need to change that. Because in our rural counties in particular, I talk to directors of schools who talk about that local capacity to put more money into the budget. But we also talk about the fact that highest paying positions, those districts are the you often hear that kind of pushback from local government, from county commissioners. You get paid the most, you get paid more than so much rhetoric out there. So sometimes teachers in their, we deal with this on the state board, like part of our job, the part we do not, the part we don't like, to be honest with you. So, putting a bad mark on this, but we need to lift the profession up, and so in every way, shape, or form that we do that, sometimes, compensation, we all have that desire to raise compensation. So it has to be done in a way that's sound, and we have to count on the General Assembly and the Office of Finance and Administration and all the other places. So it's complicated, no question about it, but each individual person goes outside this room, raising up the profession. Students get discouraged by teachers coming. Oh yeah, they do it all the time. Principals, outside, you want to be outside. You know that's so. It's everybody, all of us, all on it. And I know many of you may feel the same way. But Mr. Cox, you want to add to that?
Never really fit in this category. As some of you know, Bartlett did a pilot enrollment with PCAT, medical device specifically, which has been incredibly successful. A big issue, and one of the reasons that others, I'm sure all of you, that we can't get it is because the instructor, the salary caps that we have within the system will not bring you people out of the industry. Too big of a cut for them to take. They may have a willingness to do it, but unless we come up with a way to get outside funding for them, which in some cases, that, we can't get those people enough money. And so I think, not necessarily for today, but in the future, I would like for us to discuss what we pay teachers in some specific target areas as we talk to the governor, the legislative staff. Let's talk to Mark White. Is this issue of being able to pay the technical people and teach those skills going to be a problem? Is a problem.
The locals are figuring out how they partner with the local TCAT, and the TCAT can hire the instructor, work that relationship. See it work.
Even with that, even using TCAT salary, getting those people out of medical device where they're making six figures and above, and tens of thousands of dollars.
I'm hearing it at the university. It needs to be less complicated. It's not easy, but when people come together and put their heads together. Thank you so much. I appreciate this excellent presentation. I don't know if there are any more questions, but I do certainly want to thank all of our presenters today. I'm not ready to close it out, but I have to turn it over to Nathan, who's going to take us through next steps, and then I'll just come back a moment to say something. Nathan?
Thank you, ma'am. So I would say, just in terms of logistics for our committee members and things we need to be ready for, as you know, the statute requires us to have 4 meetings annually, and we always want to reserve 2 of those for the last couple of weeks of October. So I would say be ready to respond with your availability for some teleconference meetings for the last 2 weeks of October. I will make the statement as well, now that we have 2 members of the State Board of Education on the BEP Review Committee, we are going to file statements of necessity with the Secretary of State for our meetings where we're not forming a quorum in person. That's a difference, recognizing that we have 2 board members on. So you'll hear that, and that'll be read at the beginning of the meeting. But the process, and Mary Ann can also speak to this, as we're putting together the BEP report, the vast majority of it is, of course, prescribed. And a lot of it are the reports and the statistics and things that come to the Office of Local Finance, typically the end of September, the first couple of weeks of October, which is why the report cannot be substantially created very far in advance of its statutory deadline. So what we'll have to do is have probably one meeting about 2 weeks out where we have a copy of the report for you all to look at, just like we've done in the past, and go through and sort of copy edit and look at what we'd like to change and what we're good with. And then another meeting to say, okay, here's a final product, and take the formal vote. Because that report every year is voted on and is a formal action of this committee and is required by law. Questions, thoughts, comments, anything that you're curious about that process that maybe you've never asked before? And that, Madam Chairman, I'm listening.
All right, way ahead of schedule, and I hope that you will all be happy to be able to park here about an hour and 10 minutes ahead of time. And just in closing it out, I do want to thank the TSBA for supporting us here today and welcoming us for the usage of their space. Ms. Victoria, thank you. Thank you. This is great space for us, and I think we'd like to continue to meet with you as well. I want to thank each of you for being here today. I know it's hard to get here for an extended period of time, but I really appreciate. I know you all were highly engaged today, and that's critically important. And I hope that we'll continue to be as highly engaged, not shy about speaking up and saying what needs to be said, regardless of who you are and where you reside and what position you hold. Because if we hold back, then there's no way to have meaningful conversation and dialogue about what we're trying to do for the basic education of our students. So thank you all. I hope that you will be richly engaged on the phone call, and I know sometimes it's a little bit more intimidating on the phone, but thank you all so much. We're officially adjourned, and thank you. Have a good day.
Good to see you.